Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Eureka channel, your go to hub for mobile application development made simple. If you've been building Flutter apps for a while, you've probably heard about state management. It's one of the most important concepts in Flutter development, and it can be confusing for beginners. And I've also heard of this age-long debate among Flutter developers that between provider and block, which one is better? So today, I'll walk you through both of them, and by the end of this video, you not only understand how they work, but also know when to use each of them. So let's dive right in. So first thing first, what do we mean by state management? In simple terms, states is the data that can change during the lifetime of your app. For example, the text in the search bar, the items in the shopping cart, or the current logged in user. Now, Flutter widgets are reactive. This means that whenever state changes, Flutter rebuilds the parts of the UI that depend on that state. So the question is, how do we manage that state effectively? That's where solutions like provider and block comes in. We have other solutions like Riverpod, like GetX, but in this video, we'll be focusing on provider and block as recommended by Flutter. Let's start with provider. Provider is a lightweight wrapper around Flutter's built-in inherited widgets. It makes it easier to share state across different parts of your widget tree. Now, I know this might look a little bit abstract, but just hold on a bit. We're going to see it in code in a bit. Now, take for an example. Imagine you are building a counter app like the default counter app that Flutter generates for you when you're about to start building a project. You would have to pass values and callbacks down through constructors, which might really get messy as as your app begins to grow. So with provider, you can put your counter logic in a change notifier, then expose it to the entire widget tree. Any widget that needs the count value can just listen to it. So we are going to see this in a bit. So provider shines brightest when your app is relatively small or medium. That's one of the advantage of a provider. And when you really want things simple, easy to learn solution, it keeps boilerplate low and is very easy to set up. So without any further ado, let's jump right into Android Studio. So here in my Android Studio, I have made things really simple. Just a simple screen that has a center widget and a text widget where our account is going to be updated, and a floating action button to call the action. So the first thing I want to do is to build my counter model or my change notifier. Remember I said the other time that you can put your logic in a change notifier and make every widget listen to it. So the first thing I want to do is to build my uh, counter model class and extend the change notifier class. So I'll call this counter model, and I'm going to extend a change notifier. And I've imported all the packages that we need, like the provider package, the block package, and the Flutter block. So just declare a variable, call it count, and give it an initial value of 0. And I can just say I'm going to get the count, and I pass in the counts. So I'm going to put my method. So this one's not going to. So this is going to be my method increment, and every time this method is called, it should increase the count by 1. And then the most important method in a provider package is the notifier listener. So this is when you register the event. So it is very important you always put your notifier listener in your provider logic. So the next thing I want to do is to wrap the most layer of my widgets with the change notifier provider. So I'm going to wrap this my app class with change notifier provider. Change notifier provider, and it has a create property. So I can remove all of these, just pass in that, then remove this, and counter model, because that is where my method lives, and then my app still remains as the child of the widget. Then I go to the view, the UI, and then I wrap my center widget. My center widget will now have a child of consumer here. Now have a child of consumer. And then I'm going to pass in the counter model as a builder, and that builder will take context, counter, and child. Then put all of them in a fat arrow, then call my text widget. My text widget will just take a count, just like we have it there. Just take a count. Inside the count, we'll put just call the counter dot count. So let me give it a bigger font so that it won't be too small. Let's call it textile, and then I pass in the font size as 24. Now the final thing is just to call every time the onPressed function is called. I'll just call the increment function method that is inside the counter widget. So just make a fat arrow, then just call the context read, context.read, Model. So that's it basically. Let me try to run my app and see how things are going. All right, so the app is up, and then if I try to click on this, you see that the increment is working. Now, let's talk about BLoC, which stands for Business Logic Components. Now, BLoC follows the principle of separating business logic from the UI. Now, in my last video, I taught you guys how to use MVVM in Kotlin. Now, BLoC to Flutter is what MVVM is to Kotlin. So it just follows the principle of separating business logic from the UI so that you don't have things mixed up. And it relies heavily on streams, events, and states. So think of it this way. A user action generates an event. So when something like a button is clicked, an event is generated, and that event goes into the block where the business logic happens. So the block outputs a new state and then sends it to the UI. So this makes your app very predictable, testable, and scalable. It's especially popular in enterprise level apps and apps that have complex flows. For example, if you are working with an application that have quite a number of navigations, then what you want to use is BLoC. So let me show you how that also work in the code. So it works pretty much the same way, just that BLoC will require you to write more codes. Both are developed by Flutter, but BLoC is going to require you to write more codes. But in this video, I have simplified everything. Like this is the basic way that you can use a BLoC. So the first thing I want to do, let me first of all remove uh, all the provider codes. I'll remove this change notifier also, and then I'll begin with writing um, counter qubit that is going to extend the qubit class. And it's going to extend qubit qubit class. Oops, sorry, that's W. And it's going to take um, an hint. So I will import BLoC. Okay, I'll write the constructor. Counter qubits, very simple, and just call the super, passing the initial value. And then also, just like I did for provider, I will write the increment method, and every time this method is called, it should emit a state and increase the state by 1. It should emit a state and increase that state by 1. So just like we did for provider, we're going to wrap the my app class with a BLoC provider widget instead of our change notifier. So I'll call this BLoC provider BLoC provider, and then it also takes a create property, inside here. I'm just passing this, then I extend the fat arrow, and then that's going to be the counter qubit, and then the child is going to be my app. And then we go to the view like we did for provider class. So in the view, I'm just going to, let me change this first. Provider, instead of provider, let me have BLoC. And then, so the child will no longer be a consumer, it will be a BLoC builder. And that builder is going to take a so context and count. So I have replaced it with a BLoC builder, and so in here I'm just going to call the count. So when an action is selected, when a button is pressed, instead of having a counter model, I'm just going to have the counter qubit, and it's going to call the same increment, just that now the increment now lives inside the counter qubit and not a provider method. So let us refresh, let us run the app now and see how that behaves. So our app is running now, and you can see that the block counter here has already changed based on the text that we passed here. And we try the functionality, you see that the count is changing, and that does pretty much the same thing. Let's just increase this font a little bit, and text style, passing text font, okay, font size, sorry, font size, and pass 24, so that we can have a bigger font. So the comma should be here. So if I restart that, it makes the font bigger. Okay, so I see that that does pretty much the same thing. So back to our golden question, that which one should we use? Like I said in the video, if you want something really simple with less boilerplate and you are working on small to medium projects, then provider is your set state. But if you are working on a more complex app, then you want to use BLoC. So to wrap up this video, both provider and BLoC are powerful tools. Your choice depends on your project size, complexities, and your team's preference. So if you found this explanation helpful, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe for more Flutter and Kotlin tutorials, and let me know in the comment section what are your thoughts on what has been discussed. Which one is your preference? Is it provider? Is it BLoC? I really want to thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one.